Hello, my name is Rick Brimmer-Coleman on behalf of the Minneapolis Club and my firm, Brimmer-Coleman Associates. Welcome to Club Entrepreneur. Actually, today's a big day. It's the 10th anniversary or birthday for Club E, and that's a long thank you. That's a long time, and I'm very grateful to have had all of your support over these years. In fact, if you actually flash back to 2007, that was the year that the iPhone was introduced, and as of this week, we're now on the iPhone 7. I've been involved with venture capital for over 20 years now. I've advised, invested, and assisted countless entrepreneurs, and so this has been a real pleasure for me to be a part of your entrepreneurial journey, and I've tried to help inform, connect, and inspire all of you. So again, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate the support. You've helped make this group what it is, and what it has become over that 10-year period is a powerful community with 5 locations, having hosted over 100 of these events, and have served nearly 8,000 attendees. And we're getting bigger and growing, and I appreciate all the support that you all have been in doing that. The event like this and the Club E community wouldn't happen without the sponsors, and they make this possible, and I'm also very appreciative of them. I know I have a couple of folks from Schwegman Lumberg Woosner here, the intellectual property law firm. Raise your hand, the SLW folks. They've been supporting the group since 2007, so thank you very much. Olson Thielen CPA is a full-service accounting firm. I know I have at least one over here, a couple. Oh yeah, Joe's over there, Joe and Mike. Thank you. They've been a supporter of Club E since 2009. Irish Titan, I know we have some Irish Titan folks. Darren Lynch and crew have supported the group since 2013, and they're a web development and e-commerce company, so thank you, Darren, very much. And Sunbelt Business Brokers, M&A advisory firm who got started earlier this year. I have a couple of Sunbelt folks over there. Raise your hand higher. Yeah, there you go. Good job. Anyway, so I've worked with all these firms firsthand, and I know that they can take care of your needs if you have any in their respective areas of business, so please seek them out if you need their help. On the announcement side, please remember to RSVP online to Brown Paper Ticket. It makes the events run smoother. On the website is clube.com. You can sign up there to get a newsletter with all the events. There's also videos and a business directory that you can join if you would like. There's a LinkedIn group, Club Entrepreneur-Minneapolis. There's actually over 2,100 people in that group now, so if you join that group, you can connect with the folks who are coming. There's also actually a meetup group too. I know some of you folks have found us through Meetup. There's actually about 1,200 people in the Meetup group now. So that's another way to get connected with this universe. And last one, less efficient for sure, is give me your business card and I will do my best, but no guarantees that you will find your way into the newsletter. Minneapolis Club is a great place to do business as well as do stuff with your friends and family. It's been a real good place for me and my family for a number of years. If anybody has an interest in Minneapolis Club and what that entails, please see me. And then lastly, again, thank you to John Cosgrove of Voice Hive and Sarah Mikulich of the Start Group. Sarah, raise your hand. For helping put the technology into the event as well as make it more informative for everybody. There is a list of future events on your table, and the next Club E is October 6th, which is a 20 by 20 session. Those are the 20 slides, 20 seconds a slide, 6 minutes and 40 seconds to tell a story. It's a fun event if you've never been. I've done about 10 of these over the years, so please attend that one if you can. And then November 3rd is Moneyball for entrepreneurs. Anybody's into kind of the analytics side of things and trying to figure out if you can quantify some of this stuff that we're all kind of shooting from the hip from or doing our own kind of guerrilla due diligence or whatnot. It's a way to tie in analytics. Which leads us to today's event and our panel, Grumpy Old VCs. I have this listed as number 3, but as a couple of you folks know who go back to the venture capital days, I ran the Minnesota Venture Capital Association a number of years ago, like the middle part of the last decade, and we did some grumpy old VC panels there. So this technically is probably about panel number maybe 6 or so, but here at Club E, it's panel number 3. We've had these gentlemen here a couple times before, twice in 2014. So it's my pleasure to bring you back our esteemed panel of grumpy old VCs. To my immediate left is Norm Dan, and then Andy Greenshields, and then John Tricano, and last but definitely not least, Dick Perkins. Thank you very much for coming today. The event is supposed to be mostly a Q&A session, giving you all a chance to ask these guys any questions that you have. I have a list of questions, but this is an opportunity for you to chime in with any thoughts that you might have. We have a mic over there.
It works. It works like this. And if you're shy, you can also submit your questions via VoiceHive. There's a Q&A button on there.
All right, so just quick background. Norm was in the med device industry originally. He got started in the venture capital business by co-founding Pathfinder Ventures in 1980. Andy Greenshields began in the venture capital industry in 1973, and along with Norm Dan, and was it one other gentleman? One other gentleman co-founded Pathfinder Ventures. John Tricano, kind of jokingly say the baby of the group, got going in the venture capital industry in 1978, and he's been at 3 different venture capital funds. He now has his own M&A advisory practice serving the food industry. His firm is called Acorn Financial. And Perkins began his investment career as a buy-side analyst in 1957. So he spent multiple decades investing in both public and private securities through his asset management firm, Perkins Capital Management. So if we add up all those years of investing experience, it's actually over 170. So some good deals, some bad deals, a lot of things learned along the way, which is the reason that we're doing this panel today. So again, it's supposed to be interactive. Chime in wherever you want, but why don't I kick off the first question, which is, you've done some deals that have worked, some deals probably spectacularly so. Why did the ones work so well? What were the ingredients of the deals that worked, and why did they work so well? Anybody feel free to chime in.
My turn? Well, it's a good question. I don't think any of us know the answer. Probably one of the things you learn is that it's people more than the idea. There's a lot of good ideas out there. The shortage seems to be of people. That peculiar character that is willing to risk everything to do a startup with no guarantees. I mean, that's still an unusual situation. So I would say that I've had as many or more failures than successes. The good news is some of the successes really worked. And that's the secret. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we're all going to fail. I do have another thought about it, in that I think the process for getting a new company started needs some improvement. Because what happens today, I think for the most part, is somebody has an idea, and then the hope is that some investors are going to come around and turn this into a company. And I think we jump too fast from this creative spark to this commercialization. And my sense is we need a middle ground. Now, incubators and other structures have been struggling with dealing with this, but I think it's almost a legal question as to what do we call this thing that is beyond invention, but before commercialization. I think we need a new structure, because the problem with forming a company right away is you're stuck with all the overhead of stuff you don't need. I mean, you got a management team, there's nothing to manage. It's a skunk works. You need people that are creative and technical and whatever. So I think it's a problem. And I think the investors are struggling with this, and I can see this through the university, which I don't think is unusual here. I think it's common to all universities, is there is tons I mean tons, of technology that is being spawned in these facilities. The percentage that sees the light of day is infinitesimal. I mean, it's terrible. The universities are ill-equipped and not well positioned to commercialize this stuff, and the commercial people don't know quite how to get into this very early stage thing and take it into a company. And the net of it is the majority of it doesn't work. So I think we're taking a lot of public money, because most of the research is funded by National Institute of Health, by the way, in the medical field. So it's your tax dollars. And the purpose of those tax dollars is to develop stuff for the public good. And I can tell you that the vast majority of this stuff will not do the public any good, because it won't get commercialized. And I think we have a challenge in trying to figure out how to make that process more efficient.
Well, after we get all the wisdom from you all, maybe we'll get a few more of those to the finish line, right? Anyway, Andy, what do you think makes a deal work and one be successful?
Well, it all boils down to people. It's if you look at the successes I've had over the years, and the failures. You always learn more from your failures than you ever do from your successes. But we've rarely did at Pathfinder did we have a company fail because the product didn't work. We've had products fail because we misinterpreted the marketplace. We're too early, too late, whatever. To me, it's a people thing. If you look at the companies that we had that were successful, they really had a good group of people. And as usual, I have to disagree with Norm. I think this fuzzy thing in the middle that he's talking about, this is where the real entrepreneurs show up. They grab the idea, they look to see whether there's a market, and then they go out and try to make a business. I don't think there's any bureaucracy that's going to be able to take something from the university, which is very difficult to work with in the first place, and get it out and make a company out of it. You've got to have somebody that's willing to grab these pieces and run with it, and not some consultant that's trying to build a business. And so, Norm, as usual, we're arguing against one another.
That's what made it work.
John.
Yeah, I guess I've always said that I had 3 Ps: people, product, and potential. But I think, especially in the last part of my investing career, which was in the food industry, product has become more and more interesting because of the change in the marketplace. And so both people and product are very important, but this millennial generation right now is changing the food industry dramatically, and you're seeing products that maybe in the past would have been successful not being successful today. And the natural and organic and gluten-free and all the trends that you're seeing are real, and those are the areas that are most interesting in the food industry right now. People are very important, but again, product is becoming even more important in the food industry. And you're seeing companies like General Mills, which used to always grow 10% a year pretty easily. They have basically negative growth right now in their base business, and the only way they're showing any top line growth is through acquisitions of natural and organic companies.
Perk.
Yeah, well, the word people is a very nebulous term. Everybody says, well, we got to have the right people. Well, you don't find out if this person is the right person or the right people are the right people until you've been there and worked with them, and then you find out that really this person wasn't the right one. It's a very difficult thing. I can tell you this, that over the years, I've served on a great number of boards. I'm thinking about the 7 or 8, I guess, that were public and that were eventually sold. And in each case, we changed the management, the person at the top, at least twice along the way, and in some cases more than that, 3 or almost 4 times, until we found the person that had the ingredients or the ability to do what the board thought that it took. So, yes, it's people, and as John said, the 3 Ps for sure. I'd add a 4th one, I guess, and that's probably prayer. So that would be my answer. And by the way, Rick, you mentioned 170 years here.
Yes, sir.
That's just about exactly how old I feel. Okay.
Well, you look a lot better than 170.
So you know that's the reason we're grumpy is because we're old. Except for John, he's a newcomer.
All right, so we went down. We have one over here.
This question came in, and I think it's been answered, but I'm not qualified to say if it's been answered or not. Why don't investors invest in pre-revenue companies anymore? To me, pre-revenue sounds like no revenue, but you can interpret that as you want.
Yeah. So question from the audience about investing in pre-revenue companies, and how has that changed over the years?
I'm still doing some private investing, and a group of us just invested in a pre-revenue company about 6 months ago, and right now I sort of wish I hadn't.
That's the reason nobody wants to invest.
Yeah. It's been Murphy's Law. Whatever could go wrong has gone wrong so far, and we were supposed to be in the market in summer, and we're still not in the market with this particular product, and it's a seasonal food product for the summer, and we've already missed the summer. So, I mean, startups are difficult enough, but pre-revenue are even substantially more difficult. And the other thing I've noticed, at least in the things that still come to me, I don't see that many things anymore, but pre-revenue or even early stage, right now people have a inflated viewpoint of what their company's worth at the very early stages. And I just get very tired of looking at things and saying, your company's not worth that at this stage. It's just everybody thinks they're going to immediately take a small amount of money and make it go, for a long ways, and it just doesn't happen that easily.
I think this is probably Norm's area, but there's a lot of pre-revenue investing going on in the medical device business. I mean, if you catch it after clinical trials are done, the price has gone up, and so I think there's a fair amount of pre-revenue investing going on in medical devices.
Okay, so this is my chance to disagree. This is what's happened in the medical device field, that there's no venture capital in this town resident for medical devices. The reason being, if you have a serious medical device, by that, I mean, if you thought of an implantable or something that's going to need an extensive clinical study to get approved by the FDA, you're probably talking 10 years and $100 million. I mean, it's just a rough number, but it comes up pretty close. If you look at most venture funds that are organized as limited partnerships, the life of the partnership is 10 years. So it's pretty logical why venture funds have stopped investing in medical device deals, because it's going to outlast their fund, and they need to make their investment, harvest their investment, and give money back to their investors. And it's simply not a reliable type of investment day. So it's very logical what's happened here. And I think it points to a bigger thing. I don't know how many of you are involved in the medical device field or related to it, but we think of it as a pretty big industry in town. And while this industry is probably not going to go away, maybe we're going through an exercise which this area has gone through historically. We started out logging, and then we chopped down all the trees, and then we planted wheat, and we did milling, and then we went into the computer business, and we thought that mainframes would rule the world forever, and they stopped. And then we went into the medical device area. And the medical device business in this town, by the way, is a very big town, very big business. Only one company is now homesteaded in Ireland. One has just been bought by a company in Chicago. One doesn't live here altogether because the name Boston Scientific doesn't say Minneapolis. So frankly, our medical device industry is now all out of town, out of state, out of country. And what I see happening is these companies have proven that the development of product in-house doesn't happen. There's not one new product line in these companies that originated within these companies. I mean, I think St. Jude is the exception. They did start a heart valve. But the point is, if you look at Medtronic's catalog, there isn't a product line that came from Medtronic. They were all acquired. Okay. Now, if they're not good at doing this, it's got to come from startups. It's got to come from new companies. If we're not going to invest in these new companies. So I think one of the things that's going to happen, I think it started to happen. I'm involved in a company where this is exactly what we did. In order to shorten down this time frame, which the venture guys need, I think you have to bring a strategic into the deal very early.
Can I jump in there?
You want me to stop?
Yeah, I do,
Sure.
but actually what I wanted to say, a strategic from folks in the audience, if you don't know what he's talking about, there's somebody in the industry who can basically shepherd the deal through. So anyway.
So the strategic gives the deal credibility because they understand the technology. And they're not there for the investment, they're there for the product. But the fact of the matter is they already know enough that if they go in and grab it right away, they'll ruin it. I mean, they'll put it in their management team, the whole thing, because this is a skunk works operating, and they don't operate skunk works. They operate mechanisms. Okay. And so they've learned that you got to leave these things alone. You got to, okay.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in?
Oh, pardon me.
All right. I have an answer, which is money follows where the returns are. And whoever asked that question, be happy to talk to you about, but where Norm was going with this is the industry's changed, timelines have dragged on, and so people are concerned about putting in their money here and having it take out here because time is the enemy of a return, as Ben knows from the investment industry. And so folks don't want to put in their money and have it take 10 years, and that's a challenge. Anyway.
I got more questions coming in.
Okay.
Thank you to everybody
All right.
who's posting them. And putting your name in is optional. Next question is from Ricardo Moran. We have different ways of pronouncing different words. If you want a homestead in Ireland, I know a guy, by the way. We're going to switch gears because there was a sort of an eye-roll comment about universities. And the question to the panel is, do you know of any universities that are doing commercialization well? Is there good universities out there that we can use as a template for commercialization?
Yeah, I think the University of Georgia, by the way, has a nonprofit affiliate to the university that they control but don't manage. And all the technology, all the interface with the outside world commercially goes through this nonprofit. And by the way, the money that this nonprofit makes goes back into the university. But what they've done is they separated the commercialization of university IP and put it into a separate organization. And that depoliticized it from the university. It separated the issues because academia has its interest in the things that it needs to do, and the commercialization people have their interests, and these are often in conflict if they're under one roof. And I think that's one of the problems in what stalemates us. So there are some models out there that I think are working better than most universities are able to do.
Well, the University of Minnesota has done damn well with their apples. I mean, that's the one thing they commercialize the hell out of, and they get a return on every one of those bushes that's still under patent, and I don't know why they can't transfer some of that energy to some of their other departments. But,
For those of you who don't know, the tech transfer office at the U of M have made a fortune on the apples and have had less success on the other deals. So they're long on the apples, not so much on the technology, at least financially, which is what Andy's referring to. Earlier we talked about people being an ingredient that you saw over and over for deals that were working well. In terms of things that didn't work, what kinds of learnings did you have on the deals that went down or the failures that you had in your portfolio?
Well, generally, my failures have been probably sticking with certain people too long and not making changes. And I've sort of learned that over the years is if you're going to stick more money into a deal, sort of put good money after bad, don't do it with the same team that's gotten you into the trouble. Try to make some changes that hopefully can change the ultimate outcome. But one of the problems in venture capital is oftentimes, and probably all of us have been guilty of this, putting good money after bad, thinking that things are going to change with the same team, same product, et cetera. And basically, my losses, I've tried to keep them small because I usually ran small funds and I just couldn't afford to keep putting good money after bad into deals that were continuing to lose money.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I've done that, let me tell you. And you just really need to look very carefully at, and you may not know what is wrong, what went wrong. It's there somewhere. You got to figure out what it is. Sometimes it turns out to be luck, I guess. And I've often said, if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. and that's really sometimes that plays a real larger role than you give it credit for. It's sort of like being in the right place at the right time or the wrong place. It's very it could be very difficult. So,
I think one of the early lessons I learned when we got started, nobody wanted to play with us. We were the new kids on the block, and so we did almost all the deals ourselves, and maybe we'd drag in a couple other investors. But so we were leading most of our deals, and that fund was tremendously successful. I think we just had beginner's luck. And in the second fund, we started playing with the big boys because now we were part of the group, and we could do deals with bigger players. And one of the things I witnessed was that many of them had a philosophy that if you put more money into the deal, your money is protected because you're safer. And what I learned, and I think a lot of them had not had experience with really early stage stuff. I mean, they were doing expansion type investments or investments in growing companies as opposed to starting companies. And what I learned in starting companies is the worst thing you can do is throw too much money at it. Because at that stage of the game, nobody knows what they're doing yet. And everybody knows how to spend money. And that money you first put in, that's play money. I mean, that's just, it comes in and it goes out fast. And about the time that money is gone, and you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on, now it's very tough to raise that next round because you don't have a lot to show for it. So I think the way you stage the financing of these things is extremely important.
Great, thank you. John or Andy?
I think they've covered the bases. It's, as I say, you learn more from your failures than you ever do from your successes. But unfortunately, you have to learn those lessons over again. But it's, my favorite story is Bob Ziccarelli, who was a well-renowned venture capitalist in this town, tells a story about replacing a founder as a CEO, and Bob drew the short stick on the board and went to talk to the guy about it, and the guy said, "God damn, it's taking you a long time to hire me. Where the hell did you go earlier?"
See, I'd like to step back for a second to, we were talking about medical companies being acquired by the large companies, and that's been very true here in Minneapolis. That's how many of the larger companies, the Medtronics and so on, have been built. Today, I'm primarily in the management of money for individuals and small institutions. I'm basically out of the venture capital business and have been, and there's reasons for that which can go unsaid right now. But in our portfolios that we have for clients, we have a lot of medical companies, a lot of new ones, because one of the things we're always looking for is it's going to be taken out. That's part of the equation. And when you own a small public, and we primarily own small cap stuff, it's a big part of the ingredient when you're valuing something. Is this a company that's likely to be taken out by a Medtronic or some large company? And what we don't like, for example, is having, and it's happened to us a couple times, is having one of our large investments, a really large one, that somebody else takes it out. And, for example, we're quite chagrined about St. Jude being sold to Abbott. Now, admittedly, we're going to get some Abbott back, and so we're still going to wind up owning St. Jude in a manner of speaking, but some of our accounts are going to wind up paying an awful lot in taxes, and we're going to wind up losing some money that we're managing because half of St. Jude is going to be gone and are going to be taxed, and many clients are having to give it away in order to avoid the tax. And fortunately, we have, you may not believe this, but we have St. Jude on the books for a number of clients at a cost of less than $1 a share.
And what was the deal,
That's
Perk?
how long we've been with that.
And Perk, what was the deal at?
What's that?
What was the deal done at?
85.
Okay.
That's the number that.
That's the ratio.
Not a bad return. Let me jump in. I guess we got some questions coming in over Voice
Yeah,
Hive.
we got a question from Michael Lunzer. When it comes to the first round of funding, what are the particular personality and traits you're looking for in the person that's presenting the first round of funding?
Well, I'm looking for people that are on their own totally invested in the deal, and I don't tell them this, but if the company fails, I want them to fail with it, and doesn't necessarily mean personal bankruptcy, but I want them to really be totally committed to the deal. About 35 years ago, I met Jim Watkins when he had left Pillsbury and started Golden Valley Microwave Foods. And when I met Jim, he had 3 mortgages on his house and working 100 hours a week. And he was just the type of person that you said, you may or may not be successful, but this guy is totally committed. And that's the type of people I like to invest with on the first round. People that if the company fails, they're going to fail with it.
I like to be sold. I mean, I like nothing better than to be sold a deal by the entrepreneur. And not that he's gone to school to learn how to sell me, but he says the right thing. John brings up one thing, the history, how he got into this product, and what he's done to look at the market. But I really like to be sold, and I love good salesmen. And
Norm, Perk?
Don't do it. the first round of a startup, you know, it's friends and family. I mean, there's nothing to buy. In other words, it's still a dream, and so you're investing in this person's dream. There's very little to do due diligence on. So it depends really whether you're an angel or an informal investor, or you're representing a fund and what I would call real money. But I think if you're investing professionally, you're probably not going to go in the first round. You're going to go in the second round. And by this time, the team has been put together. You can see the semblance of a group that's going to make this thing happen. They've got a business plan that makes some sense. Don't forget, when you start a company, it's pretty hard to write that business plan because you don't have any data yet. You don't have any information. This guy just thought about this thing last night. I mean, there's not enough there. So if you can't do due diligence on the deal, don't do it. I mean, there's got to be information, and it takes some money and organization, whatnot, to develop that material, and that's the first round. I mean, that's what I would call the first round. That's the founding round of the company. That's normally not professional money.
All right, thank you. Perk, anything to add to?
That's right. The first round is the entrepreneur. It's the kind of guy, like John said, that has 2 mortgages on his house,
Right.
and so on. And then the second round, and maybe the third, is family and friends. Probably family is second, and then the third round is friends. You just got to wait for those things to take place before you pile in. There's no question about that. That's a given.
Sometimes those friends become ex-friends.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So my 2 cents worth on that would be, I heard somebody speaking and said that, does that person view life as a passenger of a car, or does that person view life as the driver of a car? So the driver is going to be the person that is going to go kind of to the mat to make it happen, versus the passenger is like, okay, things aren't working, and gee, woe is me, and too bad we lost our money. Anyway, so we have other questions coming in?
Well, this is a great follow-up to that point that you just made, Rick, because there's probably a handful of founders in this room, and this comes from our friend here at Irish Titan, who started a company without any investment and got it going. And so the question is, you know, should they have, or differently, what kind of companies should search for investment and which ones should not? Is there a particular grouping of companies that apply to either or?
Basically, pros and cons for taking in outside capital. Why would you and why would you not?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question. If you want to have A.J. Greenshills and Son over the door in 20 years, sons over the door in 20 years, you probably shouldn't be getting other people's money. But if you're trying to, if your goal is to build a company, an enterprise that's got a multiplication factor to it, and you're not so in love with it that you'd never sell it, then maybe you should take other people's money. But if this is your baby and you're never going to put it up for adoption or sell it or anything else, you probably aren't going to treat outside investors very well. And it's interesting, companies treat all of their vendors really well, feel sorry for them, know their kids' birthdays. When it comes to the money people, they don't treat their money people too well. So, and the one reason a venture capital firm is in existence is to provide returns to the investors. And if it doesn't do that, no venture capital.
I think there's another element. You got to get more than money. If the investor isn't bringing more to the table, most companies, when you get started, do not have enough management team. You don't have a filled-out management team. Obviously, you can't afford it. You don't have a board of directors. You don't have any of this stuff. And if your investors aren't bringing those skills to the table that should make you grow faster and be smarter with what you're doing, then don't take the money, because you know, that isn't enough. And I think that is one of the problems today that, you know, investors have to be as serious about the development of the company as the people that are developing the company. It isn't just throw your money out and see what happens. I don't think that works.
Anything else from the other two guys?
Yeah, sometimes it's strictly a math problem. You know, if you have 100% of something, you can look at what that might be worth in 5 years, or look at what 60 or 70% of that might be worth if you bring in money and you can grow faster, and think about what that company could be worth in 5 years and what your ownership in that would be worth versus, you know, as I say, having 100% of something that might grow slower.
So you all, I'm sure, have given out plenty of advice over the years when you were advising and investing and so forth. But I also am willing to guess that you have received some advice yourselves that was valuable. So as you look back over your co-workers, co-investors, mentors, what advice did you get that you found valuable?
Well, I'll start out, 'cause this was a precious piece of advice. I was at a venture capital meeting like this, everybody sitting around the table with a lot of experience, and I had just been hired by Bud Ruvelson, and he sent me down to this thing in Chicago, and I had a couple of really salty old venture capitalists sitting there, and the one guy said, what worries you the most about getting in our business? And I said, well, these documents, these great big thick documents. And he says, that's all bullshit. They don't mean a damn thing. But somebody's got to keep the lawyers going. And the other guy had one, he says, well, the one big mistake people make a lot of times is they put their money into a very articulate incompetent. These are guys with beautiful degrees and speak to beat hell, Harvard MBAs. I've never made any money on a Harvard MBA, not a cent.
You lost a lot.
And I've lost a fair amount. And so I think the articulate and competent, you've got to avoid those people.
The best advice I ever got, first deal I ever did in community investment, 1978. I was driving over, it was over in Wisconsin. I was driving over to the meeting with Larry Horsch, who was a venture capital guy here locally, and we were talking, and I said, you have any advice for me? And he said, and he was concerned already, even though the money had gone in, about the CEO. And he said, John, if you see a lot of unrest or people leaving at the second level, look to the top. And sure enough, within about 6 months of that deal, we had to change the guy at the top. But that was the best piece I ever said. Best piece of advice I ever got was, if you see a lot of unrest at the second level, look to the top.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know I couldn't tell you who said this to me, but and it's been sort of a mantra of mine for years and years and years. Believe what you see and not what you hear, and not necessarily what you read, because the person that's talking may not know what he or she is talking about, and whoever's writing what you're reading likewise may not. And so you got to believe what you can see. If you look out and the sky is blue, well, okay, then you can believe that it's blue. But, just believe what you see and not what you're told or what you read. And it's been, I think, good advice, whoever gave it to me.
Good. Thanks, Burke. Norm?
Well, I think there were two things I recall. One guy told me, it was a senior in the business, that you have to learn to say no fast. Otherwise you get buried, because there's a ton of deals. And so you have to decide early on what you're going to really focus on. I don't know, I guess I had another thought, but when you get older, you forget these things.
And just so everybody remembers, Andy, say your line there one more time for everyone. Andy, about the articulate incompetence.
What do you want me to say?
Just
An
to
articulate
reiterate it, because I think that
incompetent.
was a great one. So just say it one more time for everybody to take with them.
Articulate incompetent.
All right.
Good.
Well educated, good vocabulary, good with charts and graphs, and doesn't know what the hell he's doing or her she's doing.
When I was at Cherry Tree Ventures, we had an investment in a educational software business back when that was in its very early stages. I think it was 1983. This company did about $1.5 million in sales and was profitable. And but the guy who had started was a technical guy, and the guys at Cherry Tree said, we really want to bring in a professional manager here. And so they went and actually hired a guy from 3M who, unbeknownst to us, was actually being fired at 3M. But he told Tony and Gordon that he was, available, and but he had such a great job at 3M. He wanted a 5-year employment agreement, not guaranteed by the company, guaranteed by Cherry Tree. So they gave it to him, gave him a bunch of stock options. And the next year, 1984, we lost about $2 million. The company just about went bankrupt. They fired him at the end of '84, brought the original guy back, and the company became very successful again. But this guy sold them a bill of goods, Harvard MBA, and that was a real lesson for me.
All right, so we're getting up toward the end. I'll give everybody kind of 1 minute to just put out some random thoughts or any parting pieces of wisdom for everyone, anything you want to leave the audience with. Whoever would like to start, feel free.
I'll start. Just in general, the last 10 years of my venture business, I ran a fund called the Food Fund, and we were investing obviously strictly in the food industry, and we didn't have a whole lot of good opportunities here in the Twin Cities. We invested a lot up in New England and other places. But I'll tell you, in the last 5 years, and I'm still doing some small investing in food companies, there's been more good opportunities in the Twin Cities coming to me than there was in the 12 years I had the Food Fund. Unfortunately, most of them think they're worth more than they are, and so I have to try to get them to bring their valuations down. But there are a lot of good young entrepreneurs in the Twin Cities developing very interesting food products.
Just to chime in on that, John and I had breakfast with a guy a couple months ago, and he had an interesting product and a little bit of traction in the marketplace, and I thought I was being the hero of the day by introducing him to John, and we go and we have this breakfast, and we're sitting down, he's got great charts, and he's doing all these wonderful things, and we get to the valuation question, and John asks him, and he tells us, and John and I look at each other, and it's like, okay, well, that's the end of the meeting. So anyway, that valuation it can really get overblown on the front end. Anyway, okay, who else?
I'll follow up on that. There's talk about crowdfunding and friends and relatives. The worst problem I had as a venture capitalist was trying to sell somebody that the last round of financing, which they sold based on the value of what the company was going to be 5 years from now, rather than what it's worth today. It's really tough because the guy's got to go back, or the person, the entrepreneur, the lady has to go back and explain to their relatives, their friends, that, yeah, we raised a nice round of money, but you've been diluted to beat hell. What you bought for $10, they bought for $1. And, if you're watchers of the Shark Tank, my wife has become addicted to the Shark Tank. She's finally figured out what I did for a living. And but if you watch that show, a lot of the valuations are up to friends, neighbors, and silly people when they walk in there. And that's a tough proposition for venture capitalists, and we get a bad name for being jerks. But I don't want to pay 10 years prices now. I want to get a 10-year price when 10 years is up if I pay a reasonable price now. And John, since you're in the food fund, and you're dealing with millennials, I made one of my rare wanderings into Whole Foods the other day, and this young lady came up and said, "Can I help you, sir?" And I says, "Yes, I'm looking for some gluten-free organic aluminum foil."
Did they have it?
She, took her a while to figure out that it was a joke.
Right. Norm or Perk?
Well, it's like, Andy, it's like going to, a fast food place and telling them that you want 6 or half a dozen chicken nuggets, and they say that we don't have that. We only have 6 or 12. It's the same type of thing. But earlier talking about valuations, that's what we call in the marketable securities business, which I'm in, is using a forward PE. Okay, to figure out what the PE, price earnings ratio, is going to be down the line somewhere, which assumes, of course, that everything works and everything is successful, and therefore you can pay this price for it today based on that forward PE. Well, that just doesn't work. It never worked for me, and I don't think it just doesn't work, period. But just, like, I guess while I'm talking, back to where we started was people. I think the most important thing is to do an extreme amount of due diligence, even more than you think you have to, because surely you will have overlooked something. Of course, it may be impossible to examine everything, but you just got to get out there and really do a lot of what we call due diligence. And I've made the mistake sometimes of saying, well, I don't have to do anything on this part of the guy's history because I know him so well. I know, well, lo and behold, when you go back and look it up, like in the past, there have been issues and problems that you had no way of knowing about without really digging. And these things are all important. Not that, I can't imagine that there are any of us that don't have some skeletons of some kind in our closet. But nevertheless, that's what's very important.
All right, so valuation and due diligence. Thanks, Perk. Norm, you want to close it out for us?
Oh, good. I get the last shot. I guess a couple things. One is I started talking about the fact that this area has rotated through several industries as time has gone by, and we're currently, I think, sort of rotating out of the medical industry. And I think to those of us who think this is a pretty good industry, before we walk away from this thing, which I think we're doing because nobody's investing professionally in it here, we ought to really think about ways of doing this because this healthcare, as far as the future goes, is, in my mind, going to be a continued growing business. Witness us. I mean, we're all getting older. We're demanding more and more health care. This business is not going away. So I see this as a growth. It's a big part of our economy today. I don't know, 17, 18% of our gross national product is in the medical area. It's a huge business. So I think before we calmly walk away and say, oh yeah, we're in the software business. Well, let me remind you that software in my mind is a tool. It's a tool for most businesses. I mean, there are many businesses today that are not involved in software. But I don't see software as an industry. And first of all, I don't see our area as being leaders in that field because it's pretty diverse all over the country, and there are areas that are a lot more active than we are. So I think we ought to think seriously before we walk away from this huge medical device industry we have, which I think will begin to leave us as all the indications are there that that's happening.
Right.
And if we don't keep feeding that mother with new product, it's not going to continue to grow.
Right. Unfortunately, it is already happening.
Yes.
Looks like it anyway. All right, so thank you everybody for coming. There's a list of upcoming events on your table. October 6th is the next Club E meeting, and thank you very much for attending. Thank you.
First,